In 1962, a middle-aged Alaska Native man boarded a sturdy wooden boat, the Princeton Hall. Walter Soboleff was a beloved Presbyterian pastor setting out to serve new congregations, mostly Alaska Natives, Tlinkits and Haidas, in villages and towns scattered throughout the islands of southeast Alaska. Pastor Soboleff began his new mission through this wilderness with mixed emotions. For his beloved Presbyterian church had just betrayed his parishioners and broken his heart. First it was Russians and then Americans that came to their world seeking its wealth of furs, gold, and salmon. Native warriors held the Russians at bay, but when the Americans came in 1867, they brought overwhelming force, frigates with cannons that destroyed entire villages.
I think the handwriting was on the wall, if you will. And so there was an early decision that I believe among Native people that we are going to have to learn to live in this new reality. And so that was what the missionaries provided for Native people, was a way to learn these ways that were the wave of the future.
The first Presbyterian missionaries to Southeast Alaska were of the generation that came of age during the abolition movement, when their parents were risking their lives and fortunes to help people escaping slavery. They were truly the radical liberals of their day. They actually believed Alaskan Natives were the equal of white people. And that, trust me, was a radical attitude in those days. They had a civilizing mission. It's what they thought. And at the front of that was teaching Alaskan Natives how to read, write, and become educated.
What the missionaries did not do is indicate any appreciation, really, of Native culture. This certainly wasn't an encounter of equals.
It was 60 years later when, in 1940, Walter Soboleff returned to Alaska from the Dubuque Theological Seminary. He'd answered the call to become the pastor of Memorial Presbyterian Church in Juneau. He was 32 and about to be the first Alaska Native pastor in that city.
Was there discrimination in the community that I was born into and raised? And yes, there was.
Maxine Reichert's mom and her girlfriends returned from college to start new jobs.
The first thing they did was try to find a place to rent, and they encountered so many, no, we don't rent to natives. The other thing that was so obvious of the discrimination was that most of the restaurants and stores in Juneau had signs that said, no natives, no dogs.
Racism wasn't the only challenge confronting Pastor Soboleff.
Dad was telling me about how his first service was, and he said one time he opened the door and no one showed.
Dr. Soboleff worked very hard in contacting people in the Juneau Indian Village to invite people to the church.
He would give the sermon partly in Tlingit and partly in English. And that was really good for the Native people, because some of them didn't really speak a lot of English. They spoke Tlingit at home.
The youth met with him during the winter, and we roasted hot dogs, and he just talked to us and asked how we were doing, and we prayed, and it just felt so comfortable. It was like our second home.
Memorial Church also helped with practical things like providing free daycare for children.
Oftentimes there were social workers that were meeting there. There were clerks of court that met with those people so that they could help them. And Dad was facilitating that whole avenue. There was also people who were not Native that were coming there as well, because He recognized that the need went bigger.
The church even hosted clinics when visiting healthcare providers came to town.
There were committee meetings that were going on. There were social meetings of the Missionary Society, or there would be an elders meeting that was going on. There would be Sunday school teachers who would be having connection meeting. And of course, every Wednesday from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, there was about 30 people who would come in for choir practice.
Some of the white neighbors came to Walter and said, "Is it okay if we join your church?" He asked the congregation, would it be okay if these non-natives joined our church? Nobody had a problem with that. Therefore, it became the first integrated Protestant church in Juneau.
Thanks to Walter, the church partnered with the Lions Club to start a major sporting event that still carries on today.
During the gold medal basketball tournament, which is a really big deal in Southeast Alaska, participants would arrive in Juneau by seine boats, and the teams would sleep in the church basement for the whole week during the tournament.
And Walter's son would cook for them. And in addition to the teams coming in, a lot of the villages just emptied out. They all came.
For over 75 years of gold medal basketball, Alaska natives and non-natives have been sharing fun-filled experiences that build friendships and respect.
So Memorial really became an important center for Native life, and also a bridge between Native communities and white communities in Juneau.
The Presbyterians had another church in Juneau with an all-white congregation, the Northern Light Presbyterian Church. In 1962, the National Presbytery notified Reverend Soboleff they were closing his memorial church, even though it was growing, while the Northern Light Church was not. The leaders in Philadelphia sent no one to help cushion the blow to the congregation or explain the closure.
I believe that the white church leadership, both consciously and unconsciously, assumed that the white church was a superior church, that it was the right way to be a Christian was through white Christianity.
And I know there were tears among the membership, which included me. And this was 60 years ago, and it still affects me very, very much.
I just became very saddened and outraged by the racist closure of the church. Well, the Northern Light Church was given a $200,000 loan to build a new church. At the same time, Memorial was being closed.
On the day they tore down his church, Walter came to watch.
He stood there and watched his work of 24 years end up in a pile of rubble. And it hurt him very deeply, both he and Mom. I don't think ever got over that.
And I never joined a church. And I know this affected other members very similarly to how I felt.
Instead of giving Walter a chance to fill a vacant position at Northern Light Church, the Presbyterians called him to become a seafaring evangelist at large, with no church of his own.
Dad continued to spread the word as he traveled on the Princeton Hall to all the villages, and they would be so excited that he was coming. And he would hold his services right on the dock when they'd come in if they didn't have a place to worship.
In time, Walter retired from the church, but he remained active in community and religious life. He died in 2011 at age 102. The Presbyterian Church can still carry on Walter Soboleff's work to help heal the wounds of historical racism and fulfill the promise of its faith.
One of the foundational commitments of the Christian faith is the diversity of the human family and the embrace of that commitment that proclaims that God is the God of all people, and that all people, all manner of folk, of all ages, tongues, and races, are called together into one body.